The question is, what has been done? And Carol shared with me a story at lunch, which I will repeat, which is, since she didn't repeat it, she was talking about fear that we all have. And I'll come back to this when it's my turn to speak. It's a kind of a low-grade infection, and it's always there. It's under the surface. And in her case, or in this case, she was talking about money, and she gave me an example of a very simple thing, seemingly, developing a budget and going through it and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the process, she said it relieved her, because she said, gee, this is something I don't need to be afraid of. So here's my point for the group, and I loved what you said. I really did. And it built on what Brent was saying, and I will try and do the same, because this is really a continuing conversation. That's what this is. And it will continue after this meeting. It began before this meeting. Mother Teresa said, we cannot do great things. We can only do little things with great love. My challenge for us is not can we create a movement in America or even the Methodist Church or anything else. I hope it happens. But I hope everybody in this room can take away from this gathering here today some little thing, some one thing, whether it has to do with contemplative prayer or the equivalent of making a budget or the homebound. It doesn't matter, but let's call it best practices. And let's find a way, coming out of this meeting, this is my challenge to you, Will, that we can share those things that really actually work. And you remember, Will, yesterday I came up to you in that wonderful networking session, and I said, it would be a little bit better if we just had people raise their hands or we moved aside a little. Some of these things are very, very small, and don't be afraid of the small things. Find a way to do them.
You're supposed to ask me a question, I think.
My question is, what comes out of, what are the things that you didn't get a chance to say because you didn't have enough time, particularly in terms of this challenge?
Oh, gosh, thank you.
Because you have so many you've worked at this for 5 years now.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. I think the biggest thing for me was to stop being afraid of just hanging.
Just hanging.
Yeah. I think our generation, the boomers, we were so competitive from the very beginning.
Yeah.
You showed that picture of your classroom. I remember they put us alphabetically because the teacher couldn't remember our names otherwise. There's so many people in that classroom. And in order to be noticed, you really had to stand out.
Yeah.
We all excelled. We're such overachievers. And Rick, you're the worst case.
I'm a case of needing help. Can I help you? Yes. Help me. I'm a workaholic.
And I have to say, I was very much the same way. So my colleagues that have known me over a period of years are sort of shocked when I tell them that I'm just really just so happy just to do less and less and less. And to pick my occasions wisely. I think one of the practical issues is, when are you going to get boomers to come to your church? When in the day? If they're still working, they can't come during the day. During the weekend, if they're still running marathons, which they are, or going to the power brunch with the family. And at night, I'm sorry, come 9 o'clock at night, I don't care how youthful you feel you are, you're falling asleep in front of the TV, right? So, that's one of the questions, I think, what time of day, and then if you try and do it during the day. So I don't think of retirement as a problem anymore. To me, I've replaced the word retirement with freedom. That means that I'm free to go to church or temple or whatever during the day. But if I were a boomer that wasn't retired, then I can't go during the day. I don't have control over my time. So, how do you bring the church to people who are still working but asking these questions, I think? And I don't exactly have the answer.
He
but
has the answer.
Yay!
This was your job for all those years.
It was my job all those years, wasn't it? My goodness.
So what'd you learn? What do we do?
What do we do? I feel in awe to be sitting up here with Rick and with Carol.
Pshaw.
And I mean that in all sincerity. I've known Rick for years through the National Council on Aging, and perhaps more directly through the National Interfaith Coalition on Aging, and have respected Rick in so many ways, just as Carol had indicated. And with Carol, getting to know Carol in more recent years, we have what we call the Nashville Area Intentional Older Adult Ministry Network that meets monthly. And Carol is a member and has shared with us her insights on spirituality and aging, which has been so very helpful for us. And it's just a joy and a delight. One of the things that I must say that I really appreciated and resonated with what Carol shared is the whole idea of getting older. I really do resonate with that fact. I look forward to the opportunity of growing older. Now, not growing old, but growing older. With great richness, with great opportunity. And I believe that we, in our role as church leaders, have got to help church folks understand that. And the more we shy away from it, and the more we want to use other language to try and disguise the reality of growing older, is we're not being faithful to the task to which Christ has called us. An example that I want to give to you, and just to then give it back to Carol to elaborate further. When I was a little boy, I grew up in the Pennsylvania Dutch country, obviously in Pennsylvania. And my great-grandfather was named Sterling Grimm. And he had a farm down in the lower part of York County in Redline. And I would spend a good portion of my summers with my great-grandfather, who was, as a Pennsylvania Dutchman, a part of the United Brethren tradition. And he would take me by the hand, this big Mason farmer who would take me by the hand, and we would walk to church when I would spend the summers with him. I looked at my great-grandfather, who, some of you may know me, I was a rather mischievous little boy. And my great-grandfather never looked at me that way. My great-grandfather gave me love, gave me hope, gave me faith, gave me a sense of belonging. And I could not wait with great anticipation to begin to have gray hair and to espouse the same kind of love and wisdom for my grandchildren as my great-grandfather gave to me. And I honestly, I really think that we have a responsibility as we grow older to hear what Carol had to share about that spirituality and aging, that it is good to grow older. It is the way God intended us to be. It is part of God's creation. And just to share that and to live it out with people in our congregations and in our community is the task that we have. And I'd like for you, if you would, Carol, just to elaborate a bit more on that whole area that you talked about in spirituality and aging with growing older.
Well, while you're talking, what was striking me is a lot of people are asking the question, is there an evolutionary purpose to growing older? You know, why would God put old age at the end and death after that? If it really is a test of our faith, I think. You know, doesn't mean. I love the part of all of our traditions where you can argue with God. You know,
That's a very Jewish idea.
I was gonna say.
But it's also United Methodist, too, I think.
Well, Penwell Ridge. If you're from the Nashville area, we've got a place called Penwell Ridge where, you know, that's the story of Jacob. Was that Jacob that was struggling with God on the bank of the Jabbok River, you know, wrestling and all that? So I want to throw another name out there, though. His name is John Robinson, and many of us know him. He's written a new book called The Divine Human, which I really, really love. But he says, you know, for him, the purpose of the losses that we experience late in life is, you know, think about all of your friends that have dropped out and become Zen Buddhists, for example, you know, or go to meditator yoga or things like that. What are they trying to do? And even the mystical traditions of Christian and Jewish and even Sufi, you know, everybody's trying to get rid of the focus on self. right? Trying to go to selflessness. Well, the great thing about aging is it does it spontaneously. Right. We don't have to pay anybody. We don't have to go practice it.
They don't return your phone calls anymore.
Your ego gets eroded, right? And every religion, says, at the basis of it, we shouldn't be so attached to material world and things. Well, what happens when you grow older? You lose your things. You can't keep yourself distracted and busy all the time. Well, again, these are the organic gifts of aging, and the thing is, it's not. I think a lot of people hear that and think, oh well, you're just you're an apologist. You're trying to make the best of a bad situation. It takes a leap of faith to cross the transom and see, well, maybe there really is something in here for me. And once you've tasted what that thing is, this is so silly, I can't believe I'm going to do this either, okay? Do you see this thing hanging down? Do you see this?
Yes.
You see it? Okay, that's my freedom curl.
That was a pious. That was a Jewish thing. Okay, sorry. Okay.
This is my freedom curl because if you look at my older books, you're going to see me. I am so buttoned up. My hair is like slicked down with hairspray. I have curly hair. It's all smoothed down, and I've got this mask on. I'm posing for the camera, and the best thing that happened to me is I lived in Williamsburg, and I went to a hairdresser there. So there's this green hair movement. Everybody's talking about gray hair or dyeing your hair. That's a big thing. Well, in Williamsburg, the young people, they have this thing called the green hair movement. So you know what that is? Let your hair be what it wants to be. So it was great, with great courage. I was 63 around the time I was writing Fierce with Age, that I washed my hair and let it dry all by itself to see what it wanted to be. And it was curly, and so I've been doing it like that ever since. And then this is only about 3 months old. I decided that I wanted a braid, like a hippie braid, like we had back, and so I thought I would just give it a try and see how that went. And you see, I couldn't do that when I was dependent on my livelihood. I wouldn't have done that, or I would have had to do something I can tuck up or whatever. But for me, the freedom is I can do this. You can like it or not like it. Maybe you noticed it. Maybe you didn't notice it. Maybe you thought I had a bad haircut. Yeah. I love this thing. It's going to grow. It's going to grow long. I want to see how long it gets by the time I die. Yeah.
keep growing. I just want to say one thing about this. Keep growing that hair, okay? It grows a little micro-inchy. When I give my presentation, which is all pictures, I'm going to be showing some pictures of Rembrandt's self-portraits. And we'll talk a little bit about what the artists call late style, Spätfreiheit. Late freedom is the term in German. And it's a whole developed period that some artists, not all artists, but many go through this. And they achieve a kind of freedom in their later life that you are working at with your hair. Okay? So here's my suggestion to Will and the others in this room. Connie Goldman and I, who we heard about earlier, we put on the first session on plastic surgery at an aging conference at the Gerontological Society. It's called Facelifts and Tummy Tucks, Plastic Surgery in an Aging Society. And we had people who were in favor, against, had plastic surgeons. I'm sorry to tell you it was the last session on plastic surgery ever given at an aging conference. Why? Because people think, oh, that's bad. We don't want to talk about that. That belongs in the shadow world. So here's my suggestion for people in this room. Have events for the women in local churches in which you talk about issues like the pros and cons, and have both there, of dyeing my hair or of all these other things. In other words, begin with something concrete and very simple and very direct, and you won't get everybody. You don't need to get everybody. Call it segmentation, if you like. I don't care what you call it, but start with something like this. I love this example. I never heard it until right now.
We were talking this morning with Brent in particular, talking about how we make changes and how important that can be. And so I didn't want to, I may have made it sound like, well, we ought not ever think about changing names. That can be extremely helpful. Let me give you a case in point. Scottsdale, Arizona used to have what they called Senior Expo for the whole community. And it kept getting fewer and fewer people coming out all the time. I mean, the reality was that the Senior Expo, nobody was coming out. You know, that's where they would pass out the yardstick and the samples of denture cream and they came for all those things, but there were fewer and fewer people coming out for them. And so the leadership of the community decided, what are we going to do? How are we going to impact this community and make a difference? And so what they did was they made a significant change. They took away the title Senior Expo. They took away the type of things that they were showing, even the music that was going on. And they brought about this title, Festival of the Wise. Festival of the Wise.
That's called rebranding.
Festival of the Wise, rebranding, and how important that was to the transformation of that community. Let me give you another example, because I think this all transcends to our churches as well. Up until a few years ago, here in Nashville, we had Senior Citizens, Inc. There were about 8 or 9 buildings throughout Nashville area that were called Senior Citizens, Inc. And one day, Janet Jernigan, who was the executive director, said, Rick, would you come and meet with our board of directors? I said, sure. So during that process, I'm talking to them about boomers and the importance of thinking ahead in terms of when they have this Senior Citizens, Inc. And so I said to the board of directors, one of the things you might want to do is change your name. And then just said it quite simply like that. No more. I didn't elaborate. I didn't spend a lot of time. And after I got back to my office here in Nashville, I received a phone call from Janet, and she said, you know, what you said to the board of the directors really touched a nerve. Today, you will not find any building of those 8 or 9 buildings over the title that says Senior Citizens, Inc. They went into marketing. And I don't know, Brent, maybe you had a role in that. I have no idea because I was not a part of that conversation. But today, 50 forward. Everything that they have is 50 forward. Sometimes that does become key. On the one hand, I'm grateful to grow older. I don't care if you call me an older adult. That does not, in fact, I feel very proud and grateful for that opportunity to be at that point in my life. But sometimes we do have to look at the names that we use within our communities of faith and say, if it turns off people we're trying to reach, then we've got to make a significant difference. The Golden Cross Foundation of the Tennessee Conference asked if, in starting a new ministry with older adults, midlife and older adults, what do we name it? What do we do? What do we call it? And we really wrestled with that. And we developed a new ministry here in the Tennessee Conference called Encore Ministry, a way of trying to reach out in a different way and impact our communities on spirituality and aging.
Just a quick thing on the way to you. I belong to 50 Forward. I would never have joined a senior center at the age, but, I just wouldn't have, and I love it. And it's mutual. I mean, they still tend to skew a little older than me, but I like hanging out with older people, so it's cool. But one of the things that they were about to do, they're just changing their mission statement, and this might be helpful to you as well, because I hated what they were going to use. It was something like helping older people live their lives fully, or something like that. It just sounded patronizing, whatever. And now the new one is something like, don't quote me exactly, but it's something like, where we experience life to the full. Just a little shift like that takes away from being patronizing to engaging.
It's a little bit like what David Wolf was talking about. Have we got that correct, Brent? That kind of age. So I think these little things can make a difference. When people talk to me about this, I say, if you want to offer anthropology, offer Chinese cooking. Because people don't know what anthropology is, but maybe anthropology. And the other one on aging, and this is a true story because I visited Leisure World out in California. I interviewed a 114-year-old woman there. But years after I left there, I discovered that they had changed their name to Laguna Village Heights or something. Why? Because people they called it Leisure World, but the neighbors called it Seizure World. So the moral of this, Frank Luntz, the great consultant on communications, which he's a big guy with all the Republicans, he said, he has a book titled, It's Not What You Say, It's What People Hear That Counts. Memorize those words, would you? It's not what you say, it's what people hear that counts. And although I haven't got time to go into it today, because I do my own marketing consulting, not for money, by the way, to help nonprofits, this is the message I give to them. Try to think of it how people will hear what you are, not what you intend, not your good intentions. Okay, I've said enough.
Do you have any questions for us, Will? Are we at the end? Would you like me to read you that? Would you like me to read you that quote? Oh. I think, in terms of romanticizing, that's one of the the paradoxes that
Seems good.
I was nervous to read this in front of the group, but I will, because I think it's worth talking about. But I didn't want to say that this is the way it is, because I think if we romanticize the shadow side of things to the point where we don't feel the pain of them, then we have the possibility of not letting them impact us, and also not motivating us to want to make things different or better. But I feel like I'm happy to read this to you. So with this caveat, this is Nancy Gordon in Aging Today. What is it we are so afraid of? We live in a society some have labeled hypercognitive, a society that values the ability to think and remember as the highest good, and defines our worth as persons based on our cognitive abilities. But those who provide spiritual and pastoral care to people with cognitive impairment operate from a different basis, the eternal present. We don't lose our souls when our mind declines. Even when we are suffering from severe cognitive impairments, we can love and be loved. We are still capable of relationship. Even when our minds aren't working, we still have spirit, body, and emotions, all of which are pathways for relation to others and to God. So I think that's beautiful. If we're going to end, I'll just end with a quote from Teresa of Avila. She says, I do not wonder, God, that you have so few friends from the way you treat them.